Despite what might be expected from the losing side in a story, Sauron most definitely was brilliant. Time and time again, Sauron's schemes saw him survive the destruction his enemies wrought upon him, and time again he rose back to power, destroying Middle-earth's dominant superpowers in the process. The Elves of Beleriand, the kingdoms of Númenor, Eregion, Arnor, and in the end almost Gondor as well, were destroyed by the overwhelming might of the Dark Lord Sauron. And if his plan with the Rings of Power had worked, nothing would have stood in his way of attaining total supremacy over all of Middle-earth. Fortunately, at the last possible chance, the elves saw through his cunning plan, and his effort to control them directly could be thwarted. Still, the One Ring persisted. It was the key to Sauron's power, a small, nondescript thing that nevertheless was the key to either total victory or utter defeat. Forged in the eternal fires of Mount Doom, it could only be destroyed there. This the wise knew, and Sauron himself knew. In the end, it was only possible to win the War of the Ring because of Frodo and Sam, two little hobbits who, at the end of their strength, reached the gates to the cracks of Doom and found them unguarded. Only in this way could the Dark Lord be overthrown and a new age of peace begin. So with all of Sauron's wisdom and cunning, why did he let it happen? Had he been rushed and too hasty in his planning? Was he just being foolish? Or was there more to it? Forging the One Ring had been an undertaking of great risk. On the one hand, it made Sauron more powerful than ever, and granted him immediate and complete control over the rest of the ring-bearers. But on the other hand, the Dark Ruler also created a great weakness, for as he poured so much of his own power into this little piece of enchanted gold, he made himself completely dependent on its continued existence. Only as long as the One Ring existed, and thus remained connected to Sauron, did the Dark Lord have enough power to retain his physical form. Now there were two possibilities to cut this everlasting connection once and for all, and thus overthrow Sauron. The first option was simple. One could truly destroy the ring, not just break it, but undo its very existence, and thus destroy the evil power it contained. This was easier said than done, for only by a power stronger than that which created it could this be accomplished. In Middle-earth, this could only be done by one thing: a heat far greater than any normal forge could generate. Only the eternal fires of Arda's interior, in which the ring was once forged, were hot enough, and the only access to that was in the heart of Sauron's realm, in Mount Doom. However, there was also an alternative. If someone got the One Ring and was powerful enough to fully dominate it, he could use it against Sauron and possibly even defeat him. Then the Dark Lord would be weakened forever, a still evil but completely powerless being on the very verge of annihilation, similar to what he became after the destruction of the One Ring, Of these two devastating possibilities, Sauron feared only the second. He had never thought about the fact that the ring could be destroyed, not in the least because so overwhelming was the greed that the ring grew in its wearer that even Sauron himself could not have been careless with it. No being in Middle-earth, barring only Tom Bombadil, maybe, could have willingly destroyed the ring. Every human, elf, dwarf, or even wizard would have failed at the latest on the slopes of Mount Doom, where the One Ring was at the very height of its power. As Tolkien wrote to the editor Michael Straight concerning Frodo's trouble, a person of greater native power could probably never have resisted the ring's lure to power so long. A person of less power could not hope to resist it in the final decision. Already Frodo had been unwilling to harm the ring before he set out, and was incapable of surrendering it to Sam. This reinforced Sauron's belief that it would be only the most powerful heroes of the Free Peoples that would use the ring against him. And then Aragorn, the long-lost heir of Isildur, challenged Sauron through the Palantir. The Dark Lord saw the legendary sword Narsil, which once caused his undoing, forged anew, and after the defeat of his troops at Minas Tirith, the leaders of the host of the West rushed out with their relatively small army to attack Mordor itself. All the signs of a new ring-bearer who completely overestimated himself. Yet despite this, the One Ring was not with the army, but instead already inside Mount Doom. But even then, Sauron's assumption was correct. For on the very brink of the cracks of Doom, right above the flowing lava that could undo the One Ring, Frodo broke, claimed the ring, and forsook his quest to destroy it. Only when Gollum bit the ring, finger and all, off Frodo's hand, did the fate of the ring be sealed. For only through sheer chance, when Gollum danced on the edges of the cliff in his final reunion with his precious, did he slip and fall with the ring into the undoing lava below. This series of unlikely events and its final conclusion could have easily been regarded as something so exceptionally unlikely it would be an impossibility. And even Tolkien himself acknowledges this in another letter concerning the failing of Frodo in Mount Doom. Frodo deserved all honor because he spent every drop of his power of will and body, and that was just sufficient to bring him to the destined point, and no further. Few others, possibly no others of his time, would have got so far. The other powers then took over. The writer of the story, by which I do not mean myself, that one ever-present person who is never absent and never named. This quote refers back to the Ainulindale, in which it was told how nothing that comes to pass hath not its uttermost source in Eru Ilúvatar, the one God above all in the universe of Middle-earth. So it was the intent of the Creator himself to overthrow Sauron and save Middle-earth. And it was not just there that he did that. It had been by his blessing that Gandalf the Grey was allowed to arise after his death and return as Gandalf the White, since his part in the victory of the Free Peoples was equally vital. And so here, on the cracks of doom, one could say that that exceptionally unlikely chance of Gollum's slipping was made certainty by the intervention of Eru. And thus we return to the original question. Why did Sauron not post a guard before Mount Doom? It was simply because in his, dare I add, correct reasoning, that the destruction of the One Ring by anything below or equal to him would have been impossible. But anything greater than him? As is often said, Sauron had been destined to succumb in the end. Thus we conclude this chapter and this video. Did the answer surprise you? Let us know in the comments. If you enjoyed it and would like to learn more of the world of Tolkien, be sure to subscribe and click the bell icon to be notified when Mysteries of Westerness returns to Arda. This has been Irjikor Kuruvare, and I wish you all Namari Meldonya.